Welcome to ForexTV.com. Today's Friday, June 27th. I'm Remy Hookey for your New York Forex Market Buzz. The U.S. dollar continues to see weakness against the majors, falling to a 3-week low against the Japanese yen. And taking a quick look at the latest headlines from the CP News Desk. Tame inflation growth, ballooned consumer income and spending due to the U.S. government rebate checks summarize the May PCE report. Now, the stimulus checks did not have quite the same effect on consumer sentiment, which slid further in the June University of Michigan and Reuters survey. The Federal Reserve's preferred measure of inflation, the PCE core deflator, advanced by 0.1% in May, below expectations and contributing to a year-over-year change of 2.1%. Annual core PCE remains one tick above the Fed's unofficial target level of 2%. The report also showed a 1.9% month-over-month rise in personal income in May, higher than expectations and well above the previous month's upwardly revised 0.3% gain. Personal spending rose 0.8% above April's upwardly revised 0.4% climb. And the rebate checks have not been able to uphold consumer confidence. The U of Mich and Reuters Consumer Sentiment Survey for June slid beyond a 26-year low to 56.4. The all-time historic low reached in May of 1980 was 51.7. Leading the decline was a decrease in the current conditions component, which fell to 67.6 from 73.3, while the expectations component fell to 49.2 from 51.1. Meanwhile, U.S. equities remain depressed as commodity prices continue to rise on this Friday afternoon. The major indexes continue to slide further into negative territory after selling off by nearly 3% in the previous session. Crude oil prices continue to rise after hitting a record above $140 a barrel yesterday. Today, NYMEX crude oil spiked to an all-time high of $142.26 in early morning trade. This afternoon, we're joined by Joe Manimbo, market analyst from Ruesch International. Good afternoon, Joe, and thanks for joining us.
Good afternoon, Remy. Thank you.
Well, the dollar majors have been fairly range-bound, and although we're seeing dollar weakness against euro, sterling, and yen, I'd like to first start out by looking at euro-dollar. Now, in terms of fundamentals, we do have the ECB rate decision and non-farm payrolls report on Thursday, July 3rd. So heading into the weekend, if you could give us your fundamental and technical forecast for the pair.
Sure. Euro-dollar certainly well supported, and that started this week with the Fed decision to hold interest rates steady at 2%. That was expected by the market. However, it did snap a string of 7 straight rate cuts since last September that had lower U.S. interest rates by 325 basis points. I think the main catalyst for the dollar weakness, though, this week was the Fed's statement. Although they did hint at growing inflationary risks, they also touched on downside risk to growth. I think that was apparent by today's University of Michigan survey, which fell to a 28-year low this month. But I think going forward, the fact that the central bank did not hint at a further or an interest rate increase in the months ahead, that weighed on the dollar, and that, by comparison, certainly supports the euro, which next week is expected to see its central bank raise interest rates by 25 basis points.
Well, Joe, now that we've covered euro-dollar, let's move on to sterling, which has advanced against the U.S. currency. Well, dollar negative sentiment is boosting cable against the dollar, while euro-sterling has been bound to multi-week consolidation. So in terms of levels for cable against both the euro and dollar, what's your outlook and also your strategy for the UK currency?
Yeah, in terms of levels, I would certainly watch that key $2 level for cable, and on the downside, a level of 195.80. But I think going forward, the cable could be in for a bit of a correction just on the market's view about the health of the UK economy, and that's also sensitive to any types of declines in the financial sector stocks globally, since the UK economy is heavily dependent on its financial sector.
Okay, well, let's also take a look at the Aussie dollar. Today, the Aussie against the U.S. currency broke the overnight high of 96.29 to trade up to 96.33. And commodities continue to support the currency, but looking ahead, we do have the RBA decision next Tuesday on July 1st. But technically, for the Aussie dollar against the U.S. currency as well as the yen, what is your forecast?
I tell you what, it's going to be possibly a push-pull session next week for the Aussie dollar. certainly have the commodities underpinning the Aussie dollar. However, the data that's coming out next week, if we do see any downside surprises there, we've got some credit data, some retail trade data, as well as building approvals. If we see any downside surprises there, we could see the Aussie dollar vulnerable to corrections. However, like I mentioned, if we do see a continued rise in commodities, we could see the Aussie test its 24-year peak against the U.S. dollar.
Okay, Joe. Well, while we're looking at the majors, let's also take a look at the Japanese yen. Losses on Wall Street continue to accelerate after selling off yesterday, and dollar yen does continue to pull back. But meanwhile, also euro yen is seeing a pullback from record highs hit in the previous session above 169. So what is your outlook for the yen majors?
I tell you what, as long as we continue to see some weakness with equities, that's certainly an environment that bodes better for the Japanese currency. Although it did fall to a 4-month low earlier this week, it's now actually at a fresh 3-week high against the U.S. dollar as investors flee riskier assets.
Okay, and last but not least, before we wrap it up, what are your top trade recommendations ahead of the weekend?
I would continue to sell sterling at some of these loftier levels. Sterling being at a 3-week high, or actually, I'm sorry, a 2-month high against the U.S. dollar. I think it's certainly an opportunity to take some profit. So I would sell into cable rallies.
Okay, Joe, thank you very much for joining us on this Friday afternoon, and have a great weekend.
You too. Thank you.
This has been your Forex Market Buzz with Joe Manimbo, market analyst from Ruesch International. I'm Remy Hokie. Join us later this afternoon, 4 p.m. exchange, right here on ForexTV.com.